The first time I dreamed about her. We were standing near the vending machines on the third floor. The ones that ate dollars and spat out Skittles like it was an act of mercy. In the dream, the fluorescent lights hummed, and the hallway smelled faintly of copier toner and someone's leftover pad thai. She turned toward me with a smile that was as familiar as an old sweater. Said some small thing about the weather, something only she would phrase that way, and I felt relief fill my ribs like warm water. When I woke up, the relief stayed. It was embarrassing. I was 42, a 10-year veteran of a job I kept promising to leave. And I had just had a nice dream about an office acquaintance whose name I did not know. We had bumped shoulders plenty of times. We had traded elevator nods. But I didn't know her name. I told myself it was nothing. A lonely brain can turn the ordinary into a lullaby. All day, I tried to remember what she said about the weather, but the words slipped away. Only the feeling remained soft as lint, stubborn as a stain. A week later, I dreamed about her again. This time we stood in the cube farm after hours. Monitors asleep and the building's HVAC thrumming a slow, even breath. We chatted as if we'd been doing it for years. Weekend plans. The new coffee place. Whether there's a right way to fold fitted sheets. She knew a trick with the corners. I pretended I did. When I woke up, I reached for my phone to text someone about the dream. As if I had someone to text about that kind of thing. I didn't. So I made eggs, drove in early, and avoided the third floor vending machines. I kept waiting for the dreams to fade. They didn't. They grew roots. They found light. I'd work my 50 hours a week, get home in time to microwave dinner, and then give the company the rest of me for free, dreaming about the same building, the same fluorescent hum, the same woman whose name I still didn't know. Every dream had one odd little detail: her shoes were red. The elevator button stuck. A family of dust bunnies moved like tumbleweeds under the break room fridge. But the rhythm was steady. Speak. Smile. Leave. 3 weeks in, she introduced herself without me asking. I'm Elena, she said in that dream. And you're Mark. She said my name like it had been waiting in her mouth since January. In the morning, the taste of coffee was sweeter. At work, reality remained a colder country. We would pass each other in the hallway. She'd be carrying a folder. I'd be pretending a phone call mattered. I started avoiding the kitchen during lunch. The more vivid the dreams, the more awkward the daylights became. It felt like lying. In my sleep, we lingered, laughed, traded fragments of our lives. In the sun, we were strangers in an airport, glancing at each other's luggage and looking away. I wasn't going to go to the December party. Nobody over 40 with a conscience willingly stays late to drink canned seltzers under a motion-activated reindeer. But free pizza is free pizza. And someone had labeled one of the coolers Margarita Mystery, which felt like the kind of mistake worth studying. I had 2 of whatever the mystery was. Maybe 3. Around 9. I found myself standing next to her near a folding table draped in plastic holly. Her sweater had tiny pearl buttons. She looked tired and kind, the way I imagined a nurse might look after a double shift. I need to say something weird, I told her. It tumbled out how I kept dreaming we were talking. How the dreams were nothing and then not nothing. How I hated that I knew her in a place that didn't exist and avoided her in the one that did. She went still. Her eyes widened in a way that wasn't theatrical. Then she said, very softly, "You too?" We ducked into a conference room to get away from the playlist for Christmas songs. On loop. A torture method disguised as cheer. We sat in rolling chairs like kids told to behave at the grown-up table. I told her about the vending machine dreams and the fitted sheet conversation that made no sense to anyone but me. She listened with her hands wrapped around a paper cup that smelled like lime and sugar. Then she told me a version of the same story, down to the humming vents and the way the lights drifted at the edges, as if the building were underwater. Maybe we're bored. I said, maybe. she answered, and for a second I thought, or maybe not. That night I dreamed about her again, and everything changed. We were in the lobby. We said goodbye. We turned to leave in opposite directions. My foot caught on nothing. I tipped toward her. She grabbed my elbow. We pinwheeled together like a slow-motion pratfall. It should have been humiliating. Instead, it felt inevitable, as if we were two magnets finally close enough to remember how to work. She laughed. I apologized. Our faces hung in the little pause where a decision lives. We kissed. It was not poetic. It was electric. Her lip gloss tasted like passion fruit. When I woke up, my mouth remembered. After that, the dreams arrived like weather systems, predictable in their unpredictability. Every other night, Elena and I folded into each other in places I knew too well. The scent of her shampoo lingered after I opened my eyes. I'd rake my fingers through my hair and find the ghost of her hand. It seemed impossible and ordinary, like finding a seashell in a parking lot. And then there she was, on a Friday evening, leaning against my aging sedan in the November dark. Most of the lot was empty. The wind sent paper skittering. She looked up as I approached, pushed herself off the car, and came toward me with a purpose that drained the blood from my hands. Kiss first, she must have thought. Ask questions later. She was warm against the cold. It felt exactly like it had in the dream, no more and no less. When she pulled back, she whispered, "It feels like we're bound together." Bound. The word clanged in my chest. I should have said something simple and decent. I'm not sure what this is. I think we should go slow. Instead, I mumbled something about being late and left her standing there with her hands stuffed into her coat pockets like a child who'd just been told recess was canceled. I told myself it was the responsible choice. In truth, it was the frightened one. The dreams changed in the way a river changes so slowly you don't notice until your feet are in new water. One night, we were lying side by side on a blanket in a field the color of old money. Fingers barely hooked pinky to pinky. A child's promise. "I need to tell you something," my mouth said without my permission. And then I was talking unspooling about Caitlin, my college girlfriend, and my worst self. I told Elena how I had confused devotion with erasure, how I had hired myself out as a constant proof of love, how I had written a paper for Caitlin because I thought affection was a job. I confessed to kneeling on a hardwood floor and begging to be told who to be so that I could try on the costume. I admitted I had loved not Caitlin, but the idea of a person who might fix the hole I kept pretending was a mirror. The words burned on their way out. Elena held me the way you hold someone else's sobbing child tender. Startled, frightened of breaking something that is already in pieces. When I came up for air, it was her turn. Though if you'd asked me before that night, I'd have sworn it wasn't. She spoke of Erin Hale high school sweetheart. Proposal after graduation on a baseball diamond. The kind of promise people believe will outrun time. Erin died 3 weeks before her college commencement. His car folding against a concrete barrier on a highway he had been driving all night. She had identified his body by herself because there was no one else at that distance to do it. In the morgue, looking at the ruin of the boy who believed he would grow old with her, she had made herself a vow. She kept it for 10 years. Never again. Never open the door. Never feed the beast that would only take. She looked into my eyes then and said, with a conviction that sounded borrowed, "I think you could fix what he left broken." We said goodbye. The dream ended. I woke up and rose from my bed to throw up in the shower. I stayed there until the water ran cold. On Sunday, she called. I answered, because pretending this wasn't happening felt like holding my breath in an elevator and expecting to arrive somewhere else. She said, "I'm not Caitlin. I won't carry you." I said, "I'm not Erin." We were trying to be kind. It came out like a ceasefire written on napkins. We agreed to leave each other alone so that whatever was happening would starve. We did not starve it. We fed it without trying. The dreams returned with a new appetite. In the first of them, she kissed me and everything was hollow. Our mouths meeting because a script told them to. Then my fingers closed around her wrists. Then her teeth closed on my lower lip. She ripped. I swung. She clawed. My right eye filled with pain, so bright it generated its own light. She laughed like she had never laughed before feral. Relieved to have found the correct language. I woke up with my heart ramming against my ribs. No blood. No welt. No torn flesh. But my entire body ached. As if I had spent the night climbing out of a burning house. On Monday night, I dreamed about a round river stone smashing into her hand while I pinned it to a wooden table. She screamed and slammed a pair of garden shears around my right pinky and squeezed. Shearing bone makes a sound you don't forget, even if the sound only happens where sound cannot live. On Tuesday, the shower's water stung my skin with the insistence of 1,000 tiny insults. On Wednesday, a doctor looked at my chart, my face, my blood work, my empty hands, and said carefully that anxiety can manifest in very real sensations. I told her I had slept 3 hours in 2 days. She recommended better sleep hygiene and wrote down the name of a therapist. Meanwhile, someone else called in sick from my office. Something going around. My manager said, the way people do when they're refusing to say the thing out loud. By Friday, the dreams were no longer single scenes. They were loops strangling in a car with shoelaces that cut into her palms. A baseball bat that exploded my hip and left me howling in a voice I didn't recognize. A corkscrew in the soft corner of her eye. The sound of breath being stolen and returned and stolen again. We did it all. To each other. With the dedicated efficiency of people who needed to finish a task that had been assigned by a hateful teacher. I stopped pretending I could outsmart sleep. I swallowed what was left of a prescription from an old surgery. I washed the taste down with bourbon. The pills blunt the edges. The bourbon made the center glow. It didn't matter. When I slept, I dreamed. When I dreamed, I drowned. On Saturday morning, I opened my apartment door to go fetch ibuprofen and soup. My neighbor retired. Religious. Very interested in other people's noise called down the hall. This is a family building. She pursed her mouth. I saw a woman outside your door this morning. I heard you two at night. A few weeks back, behaving like animals. I nearly dropped my keys. I asked what she looked like. She described a coat I recognized. She said the woman had left when she saw her watching. My heart tried to leave my body through my throat. Down in the lot, the driver's side window of my car was shattered. Glass glittered in the seat, winking like it was happy to have been made honest. I brushed it onto the floor mat, sat down, and gripped the wheel. I had dreamed 2 nights earlier that someone waited for me in the back seat. The dreamie had not checked before starting the engine. I checked now. Nobody there. The emptiness felt personal. I called my parents as I drove east. I lied. I told my mother I had been laid off and needed a place to land in Ohio. I told my father I had a plan. He said, "We'll figure it out when you get here." My mother said, "Drive safe." The way mothers say it to sons who live as if safety is an insult. At a truck stop in Missouri, I closed my eyes for a moment after filling the tank. It was a mistake. In that stolen blink, I was no longer myself. I was Elena in my apartment, pacing from couch to kitchen, a knife in her right hand, bags under her eyes like bruises painted on the wrong parts of her face. She stopped in a way no living person stops, as if some operating system had crashed and was trying a hard reboot. Then she smiled, ugly and glorious, the smile of someone who has just remembered what to do to make the hurting stop. When I opened my eyes, a teenager in a red hoodie leaned on his horn to hurry me along. I pulled away from the pump with my hands trembling and my mouth full of copper. I made it to my parents' place just after 5 in the morning. The house looked smaller than it had when I was a teenager. Everything does. My mother cried when she hugged me. My father squeezed my shoulder twice. The old code for I don't know what to say, but I love you anyway. I slept 18 minutes that day and dreamed for all of them. For a while, I believed distance would save me. It didn't. It just bought time. Elena ransacked the scraps of my life like an archaeologist whose grant expires in a week. She asked my coworkers questions. She attempted to sweet-talk a temp in human resources who shouldn't have had access to anything. She went through my apartment like a thief who knew I had a hiding place and would find it if she took the walls apart. She grayed at the temples. She lost 10 pounds. Then 15. Her cheeks hollowed, and her eyes grew strange flat and bright, like coins in the bottom of a well. I slept in bursts, learned the new map of the old house in the dark, and lived on toast and coffee. My joints ached as if I had been beaten with kindness. My stomach broke into ulcers and sent little flecks of blood into the toilet bowl. If she didn't finish me, my own body would. Then, weeks later, I saw what would end the standstill. In a dream, I watched from behind Elena's eyes as she scrolled through the most public private photo album in the world, my mother's Facebook page. My mother posted like it was a civic duty. There I was, smaller and softer, on my first day of school with a backpack that could have swallowed me whole. There I was, in a rented tux, smiling beside a girl whose name I couldn't remember. There I was with my parents at a Mexican restaurant that had neon sombreros over the bar. The caption read, "Checked into Taqueria Mi Pueblo with my son and husband." Dinner was delicious and the company was even better. Elena hovered over the heart icon and tapped like. It was almost funny. It was not funny at all. I knew what running meant now. It meant painting a target on the people who had not asked to hold my baggage. If Elena came here, and the thing that rode her came with her, my parents would pay. That was the only part of the equation that was simple. There was a sleep clinic 28 minutes from my parents' house, tucked into a zoning strip between a strip mall and a marsh. I had driven past it 100 times when I was a kid and assumed it was haunted by retirement. Now, the word sleep glowed like a dare. I made an appointment under a name I hadn't used since middle school, Marcus. With AK, the way my mother had flirted with exoticism until a school secretary fixed it on a form. The intake doctor was named Dr. Rao. She was younger than me and older than everyone else in the room all at once. She had the kind of calm that came from knowing her job and doing it in a world that needed her. I didn't tell her everything. I told her enough. Some nights, I said, "It feels as if I am sharing a dream with someone else. When I wake up, I can smell things I shouldn't. When I sleep again, it continues like a show I didn't choose." She listened the way people do when they're using all of their attention to buy your courage. Then she said, "Sometimes the mind rehearses trauma until it realizes it can stop. But the stopping often requires another person. Would she come in?" I laughed too loudly. "No." "Then bring her anyway." "Doctor, I'm not suggesting you kidnap anyone," she said dryly. "I am suggesting we can do this two ways. One is too dangerous. The other is very dangerous. The very dangerous way is to ask her to consent to a monitored sleep study and try to induce a lucid dream while our team observes. The too dangerous way is whatever you think you'll do next." She gave me a folder consent forms, diagrams of the brain with polite arrows, a pamphlet about a technique for lucid dreaming I had dismissed as a college dorm trick. She didn't ask if I believed her. She behaved as if belief were irrelevant and action were the only currency with value. At home, I thought about walking into the kitchen and telling my mother the truth. I thought about calling Elena and begging. I thought about packing a bag and pretending that motel rooms could hide me forever. Then I wrote Elena what I meant to be my last message. I said, "We can end this, but not the way either of us has been thinking." I included the address of the clinic and a time Saturday night. 9 p.m., when the building would be empty except for people who understood suffering in a special way. For 2 days, I unplugged my phone. I told my mother I needed to spend Saturday night at a friend's. She didn't ask which one. We have an agreement. She does not ask me to invent a friend I don't have. I do not force her to pretend she believes. At 8:58, I parked in the back lot. I expected to be alone. Elena's beat-up sedan slid into a space 3 down from mine with a scrape of surprise against asphalt. She stepped out in a gray hoodie, hair pulled back, a face like a storm that had forgotten how to break. For a second, she looked like a stranger I might avoid at night. Then she was the woman from the vending machines. We stood in the small lobby while a tech named Simone placed sensors on our temples with the kind of intimacy reserved for hairdressers and nurses. Dr. Rao arrived with a notebook, a headset, and the relentless calm I had seen on Tuesday. Ground rules, she said. No touching in the waking world. No chasing. No accusations. Inside the dream, if there is one, you will do what you will do, but I'd like you to start with the same phrase. It's a kind of key. What phrase? I asked. She smiled, and it was a hard smile, carved for these moments. I release you. Elena made a sound that might have been a laugh. It might have been the first crack in something old. We slept in rooms separated by a wall a foot thick. Electrodes hummed. Cameras watched. Dr. Rao's voice murmured in my ear to remind me to look for my hands. When you see your hands, she whispered, count your fingers. If there are not 5, you are dreaming. If there are 5, you are also probably dreaming. I found myself in the lobby of our office. Because of course I did. The security guard looked like himself until you looked at him twice. He nodded and went back to not reading a sports page. The elevator button stuck. The floor numbers blinked backward. When the doors slid open, Elena stood inside. We had not planned what we would do. We had agreed not to plan. I held up my hands. I had 6 fingers on my left. For on my right, my heart soothed itself with the proof. Elena held up her hands. We're sleeping, she said. We are. For a beat, the thing that had been dragging us like disobedient dogs tugged on its leash. I felt it tighten around my ankles and hers. Not hard, just a reminder. The instinct that had been trained into my fight. Kiss. Flea knocked at the door of my ribs. I release you, I said. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were the exact color of themselves. I release you, she said. Nothing changed at first. That was the disappointing miracle. We said the words, and the world remained itself. I almost laughed, which is another word for despair. Then, very slowly, the building's hum quieted. The fluorescent lights did not buzz. The elevator's floor indicator stopped moving. Somewhere above us, the HVAC took a deeper breath and then exhaled, like a giant settling into sleep. We stood there for what might have been a minute or a year. In dreams, those units spend all day stealing each other's clothes. I don't want you to fix me, I said, which was as close to a prayer as I had in me. I don't want you to be him, she said, and there was love in it. The clean kind that sets you down and doesn't ask for your shoes. The thing at our ankles flexed, annoyed, and tried one last tug. We did not fall. When I woke, Simone was removing the sensors with the same gentleness with which she'd attached them. She said nothing because that was the job. Dr. Rao appeared in the doorway and nodded once. As if we had turned in homework she had assigned to a class that didn't believe in homework. In the hall, Elena and I looked at each other. We didn't reach. I couldn't tell if I was mourning something or celebrating it. Possibly both. Possibly that's adulthood. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making me your cure. Thank you, I answered, and meant, for not dragging me back to 22. We left through separate doors and drove into a morning that felt unfamiliar in a way that did not scare me. Ending is a verb disguised as a noun. It takes work. The nights after the clinic were not suddenly quiet. The dreams didn't stop, but they dulled into something like echoes. We still met sometimes in our sleep. But when we did, we were two people in the same waiting room, nodding, turning to different magazines. A week later, I told my parents the truth I could afford. I said I had been in a bad relationship with a bad sleeper myself and had gotten help. My mother made cinnamon toast the way she used to when I was sick. My father asked if I needed money. He asked it like a kindness, not a contract. Elena texted me one last time. It said, "I'm moving. New job. New city. No social media. Good luck." I typed and deleted 3 versions of you two before I landed on, "Take care." I returned to my apartment after New Year's. Everything smelled faintly of dust and the lemon cleaner my landlord prefers. The glass place had replaced my window. I paid cash and did not make small talk. At the office, my manager had boxed my personal effects with the benign efficiency of a person who has done this before and will again. I carried the box through the 3rd-floor hall without looking at the vending machines. I didn't go back to that job. I took a contract gig that paid less and hurt less. I found a therapist and practiced telling the truth in longer pieces. I installed a cheap set of curtains that made my bedroom dark enough to sleep without the city prying. I learned to wake without terror. On bad nights, I counted the ceiling fans turning as inventory. On good mornings, I remembered nothing. Once, 3 months after the clinic, I dreamed I was back in our lobby. Elena was there, holding a paper cup of coffee that looked like it would be disappointing. We nodded with the small pride of people who have survived the same storm and learned how to honor each other's umbrellas. "Be well," she said. "You too," I answered. We went to different elevators. We rose to different floors. A story is a machine that makes meaning. For a while, ours had been a machine that made suffering. I don't think it was destiny any more than a knot in a rope is destiny. I think we came into each other's orbits at the exact wrong right time hurt in complementary ways, trained by loss and need to mistake urgency for love. The dreams gave our hungers a stage. We were too polite to call security on ourselves. The clinic gave us witnesses. It gave us a door we could close together even if we had not chosen to open it. Last week, on a boring Wednesday, I sat in my kitchen and realized I had not dreamed about Elena in a month. The thought arrived and took a seat and did not rearrange the furniture. I finished my eggs. I rinsed my plate. At noon I walked to the park, sat on a bench near the basketball court, and watched a father teach his daughter a crossover. She shouted every time the ball obeyed her. He laughed every time she did. The sky was the kind of blue that reminds you you've been forgiving it for years for not trying. I don't have a moral to hand you that will stand at attention on your mantle. But I can tell you this. I no longer feel like I owe my dreams to a job that didn't love me or to a story I didn't agree to live. I sleep, sometimes poorly, often well. When I wake, I belong to myself. That is the cleanest ending I know how to write. If you've made it this far, I'd like to hear from you. Where do you stand on violence as a response to pain? When life ties people together with cords they didn't choose through grief, power, or plain bad timing, what feels just to you? And what feels like injustice disguised as fate? Tell me whether you think we should cut the threads, burn them, or learn to weave something better out of what's left. Leave your view in the comments. Be direct. Be brave. Take a side. It's easier to sleep when you know what you believe.